Okay, S2, welcome back after the break. I hope you had a good holiday. Just remember, if there's any work that's outstanding, please try and get it in as soon as possible. I'll mark it and give you some feedback. And today I'm just going to explain to you the task that I've given you for the next 2 weeks. So if there's any issues with it, please get in touch as always, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So in your Google Classroom, this is 2G1. But if you have a look in your stream, there's a link for today's meeting, which I'll see you at 12:15 at. But if you've missed that, then you can watch this video. And there is your work for the week underneath, and it says Antarctica, lesson 5 and 6. That's obviously 2 weeks' work. Your instructions, I'll just kind of go through them. It is for this week and next week. There's plenty of work there. I'll let you read that yourselves. There is an extension task, and that's a film documentary on BBC. There's a link to it there. So if your parents are happy for you to watch that, and that's something you feel you've got some time to do, go ahead and watch it. It's at least an hour or so long. It's just his life story, really. And he's an explorer of the Arctic. It's really quite interesting. We're going to learn about him today. So I'll go through the lesson with you just here and some of its key points. So feel free to submit what you've done at the end of this week, and then you could resubmit again for the next week. Also, the dates up on the screen just there. So your starter exercise is really just a bit of practice or key skill in geography, which is describing the location of places and really being familiar. I guess the big thing is if you're familiar with where some countries are on the planet, that's really useful. If you're struggling with that, particularly Africa, I know a lot of people struggle with 54 countries there to remember them all, but even if you know one in the south, one in the north, one in the east, one in the west, one what we call in the central area, and you could say, well, I could describe the names of the different continents, I know them, and I could talk about southern South America or eastern South America or western South America, then that would really help you. So this is just a bit of practice about describing the location within countries or in a particular place. So can you describe the location of Antarctica using the maps above? So try and write this as, maybe you could just write it as one description in one box if you can, incorporating all of this sort of stuff within it. So one paragraph would be the ideal. If you're struggling with that, just have a go at making a sentence or two for each box, and that'll help you kind of break up your description and some of the key bits you try and include in that. And there's a mark for each there. So what are we learning about? We're still learning about Antarctica and its geography. It's really quite an interesting continent. You should be able to describe its location, obviously, from a little task above, and explain the race to the South Pole. And it really was a race. These guys had been pit against each other, and they'd been trying to get to the North Pole first, but during planning, they knew they were beaten. So it was very secretive about Scott, who you may have heard of, trying to get to the Antarctica as well, and race Amsden there. And they both knew about each other's competitive journeys at the same time. And we'll look a bit about that, and it's within the documentary too. It's quite interesting. It's not even a documentary, it's a film. So your first little thing here is to think about this picture, or these two pictures, and use adjectives to say or describe the conditions in Antarctica. Remember, an adjective is a descriptive word, a bit of literacy for you. It says timer 60 seconds. That's because it's taken from our PowerPoint when we usually give you 60 seconds in class. So just quick thinking, say what you see. Okay, what do you think it is like in Antarctica, its conditions, the environment? If you were standing there, what would you feel? What would you hear? What would you see? What would you smell? Okay, so think about those descriptive words as many as you can. Just give yourself a minute or so. You don't spend ages. Learning activity 2 is to read through the information here, and I'll read it for you, especially if you're not big on reading or you struggle a little bit with key words, because there's a lot of text here. So you can just listen, and that will help you complete the task, and you can always go back and play this at the same time as when you're doing the work. So Scott's journey information sheet. Remember, Scott was a different adventurer from the UK, and Amsden was actually Norwegian. Anyway, I'll start off here. The Norwegian captain Ronald Amsden was already a celebrated explorer. He'd sailed through the Northwest Passage from 1903 to 6, and was one of the first men to winter south of the Antarctic Circle on board Belgica in 1898, and that meant he actually spent the whole winter on a ship frozen solid in the ice. His dream as a boy was to be the first man to set foot at the North Pole. But in 1909, there were 2 American claims to have reached it. The rival explorers bitterly contested each other's claims, but for Amundsen, his dream was shattered. He turned to the focus of his Fram expedition, 1910 to 1912, to the South Pole, refusing to share his ideas in case people stopped him from making his attempt. So that included the people who were funding him. They didn't realise, they thought they were giving him money to get to the North Pole or go somewhere different. And he actually headed to the South Pole, and it was very secretive. Meanwhile, the British explorer Scott continued with his public plans, organising equipment and provisions, and recruiting men. In addition to seamen and scientists, Scott decided to take paying guests, among them one Captain Lawrence Oates, an army officer, who agreed to take responsibility for the ponies. The Terra Nova eventually left Cardiff in June 1910. That was the name of the ship. Scott stopped off in Australia, and it was here that he received a perplexing telegram from Amundsen, who had sailed the Fram to the island of Madeira in the Atlantic. Scott's journey. On the 17th of January 1912, Scott arrived at the pole, 33 days after Amundsen. It was Bowers who first caught sight of a camp in the distance and concrete evidence of a Norwegian victory. As well as the Norwegians' black marker flag, they also left a tent containing surplus equipment. Amundsen had even left Scott a note to deliver to the King of Norway in case he did not return. The temperature had dropped to -30, 8 degrees lower than for the Norwegians. The dispirited men took pictures and left quickly. So they actually made it to the South Pole, Scott, but he'd been beaten, and he would be absolutely gutted. Bear in mind, it was the 17th of January, and that would be the summertime, because it was the southern hemisphere, and not the winter time that we'd have up here. But we're still talking temperatures of -30. But it didn't mean they had plenty of daylight because it was summertime. All the men were suffering from slow starvation, hypothermia, and almost certainly scurvy. Scurvy is a debilitating or weakening condition caused by a lack of vitamin C, so they didn't have fresh vegetables and fruit in their diet. Petty Officer Evans was the first man to die on the 17th of February. He had stumbled behind the group until he slipped into a coma. A month later, on the 17th of March, Captain Oates, crippled with frostbite, walked out of the party's tent. It was his 32nd birthday. Scott immortalised the courageous army officer in his diary, writing that he had left. As he had left, he said, "I'm just going outside and maybe some time." We knew that Oates was walking to his death. It was the act of a brave man and an English gentleman. A few days later, the 3 remaining men were lying in their tent waiting for death. A swirling blizzard confined them to their sleeping bags. While one ton depot lay only 11 miles away, Scott was the only one keeping his diary. "We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weak, of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more. Ah, Scott." The race to the pole was over. So, having heard that, or having read it, it's there for you to have a look at. You can watch and play this video as many times as you like. You're going to have a look at this learning activity and answer the questions in the table below. This is a write on document, so you'll be able to write in here. Who are the 2 explorers? Where are they from? Where did Scott stop before taking his journey to the South Pole? Out of the 2 men, who got there first? What did Scott arrive at? What date did Scott arrive at the South Pole? What did Scott find when he reached the South Pole? What temperature to get down to? And name one thing out of the 3 things mentioned that could have killed the British explorers. So you've got a total score of 8 marks available for that section. Learning activity 4, the race to the South Pole, Amundsen versus Scott. So watch the clip, look at the diagrams below, and take some notes as you're watching the clip. And you can do that on a piece of paper, or you can do this, just make a space or a box underneath this information here. And then what you're going to do is use that information when you do Scott's diary entry. So try and write your notes. Try and write your notes in this section underneath these diagrams. So if you write your notes in here, you'll be able to, that will help you for the next section. So this section is worth 10 marks, and this is your diary entry. You might want to leave this till next week. So you do that main task above and then come back to this. But make sure you've got your notes done as a minimum. So what you're going to do is you're going to imagine you are Robert Scott, who's leading the treacherous mission to reach the South Pole, and your task is to write his last diary entry on this page here, from the 27th to the 29th of March, and that's the date it's reflecting, talking about the final days before he died. Include the words below and the order of the death to gain the 10 marks. So the order of the death was Evans, Oates, Scott, Wilson, and Bowers as a team as they lost their battle against the elements, shall we say. The terms you need to include in your diary entry, and I want you to cross them out as you use them, are temperature, 800 miles, Umston, glacier, ponies, food, dates, deaths, and regrets. Okay, so you've got plenty of space to write. You don't need to keep it to just this page. If you want to keep on writing, the text box will just grow as you're writing in there. For superstar geographers, an extra task for you. If you've easily got all that done within the first week, for example, have a look at this. This is actually David Attenborough's visit to Scott's Hut. Scott's Hut is still there in Antarctica. It's been kept as it was from well over 100 years ago, and you can do a wee virtual tour of it. It's really quite cool. You can go and click on those links and have a look at that, and you'll see within there is other historical journeys to Antarctica. You can have a look at this information here about Shackleton and the history of its exploration. So especially for those who are enjoying a history, there's plenty of information there for you to go and have a look at and explore a little bit about it yourself. The other thing I've left you, obviously, is the film. And it's not a documentary, it's a film about Amundsen's life and his explorations to the South Pole. He was absolutely obsessed with exploring the world. He was in the traditional sense, what a geographer was all about in that early part of these early centuries over 100 years ago. So that should give you plenty of work to get on with. If you've got any questions, as always, please get in touch with myself or Miss Stobie if you're in Miss Stobie's classes, and we will get back to you and give you some help. We can even have a wee Google Meet with you if you feel you need it. Anyway, take care. Thank you. Bye.